The dust hung thick in the afternoon air, coating everything in Dry Creek with a fine layer of grit. The town square, if one could call the trampled patch between the general store and the saloon a square, was more crowded than usual. Men in sweat-stained hats stood in tight groups, their voices rising and falling like the hum of angry bees. Women lingered at the edges, skirts gathered in their hands, eyes drawn toward the same cruel sight at the center. Sheriff McKenna stood there, his silver badge flashing bright under the harsh sun. Beside him, chained at the wrists and ankles, stood a man who looked carved from the land itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by sun and hardship. His dark hair fell loose to his shoulders, and though the shackles had rubbed his flesh raw, he held his head high. His eyes, dark and steady, met the crowd's stares with a quiet strength that unsettled them more than anger ever could. "Step right up, folks," the sheriff called, his voice part authority, part showman. "Got ourselves a genuine wild one here. Caught him stealing horses from the Matt Ranch. Judge says he's to be sold to cover the damages." A wave of mutters rolled through the crowd. "Savages," someone spat. "Beast," another added. The words hit the air like stones, but the man in chains didn't flinch. $50 to start," McKenna barked. "Strong back. Good for the mines or breaking horses. Lord knows these savages are handy with animals." He waited for bids, but none came. Then from the back of the crowd, a clear voice rang out, sharp, sure, and unexpected. "Don't hurt him." Heads turned. The crowd parted as a woman stepped forward, her boots crunching on the dry earth. She wore a faded brown dress and a sun-bleached bonnet. Her auburn hair was pinned back tight, her face pale but fierce. It was Clara Whitford, the widow who lived alone on a failing ranch just outside town. Folks whispered about her, too proud to remarry, too stubborn to sell. "I'll buy him," she said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. The whole square fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. McKenna's mouth twitched with amusement. "Now, Mrs. Whitford, this ain't no charity case. This here's a dangerous—" "I said I'll buy him." She pulled a small cloth bundle from her purse. Coins clinked softly inside. $70, she said. "Everything I have." The crowd exploded with disbelief. "Clara, have you lost your mind?" cried Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife. "You can't bring that creature onto your property." "He's a thief," shouted another. "A savage." Clara's jaw tightened like iron. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man in chains. "Call him savage all you want," she said evenly. "I see a man worth saving." For the first time, something flickered in the prisoner's eyes. Surprise, maybe even something like hope. The sheriff shifted uneasily. "Mrs. Whitford, I got a responsibility to this town. And I have a right to buy," she interrupted. "The judge said he's to be sold. I'm offering payment, unless, of course, my money's no good because I'm a woman." That hit its mark. McKenna scowled, but he couldn't argue. He snatched the bundle from her hand, counted it slowly, then grunted. "Fine. Bill of sale will be ready in an hour. You can collect him then. I'll take him now. I've paid. He's mine by your own law. You can tell Judge Harrison yourself if you think otherwise." McKenna grumbled, but he pulled a key from his belt and unlocked the shackles around the man's ankles. The wrists he left bound. "The rest come off when I have my paper," Clara said firmly. Then she turned to the man. Her voice softened. "Come with me." He studied her a moment, then nodded once and stepped forward. As they walked through the stunned crowd, the people of Dry Creek parted like the Red Sea, faces twisted with disgust and disbelief. "You'll regret this." "Clara," Mrs. Patterson called. "The only thing I'd regret," Clara said loud enough for all to hear, "is standing by while you all treat a human being like livestock." An old blacksmith near the saloon shook his head. "That woman's going to get herself killed. Ain't no taming their kind, but young Tom Bradley." The doctor's son watched quietly and said under his breath, "Maybe it's not them that need taming." When Clara reached the sheriff's office, she could feel every stare burning into her back. But she didn't falter. She'd carried heavier burdens. Her husband's death, the slow ruin of their dream, the pitying glances that came with widowhood. This was nothing new. Inside, McKenna scribbled out the bill of sale with a sigh. "You sure about this?" "You could still change your mind. Just write it," Clara said. He slapped the paper down and tossed her the key. "Don't come crying to me when he slits your throat." "The only throat cut in this town lately was by Bob Harmon when he was drunk," Clara shot back. "And and he's as white as fresh cotton. Outside, she turned to the man, holding up the key. I'm going to unlock these now. I don't think you'll run. Where would you go? He didn't move, just watched her. Then slowly he held out his wrists. The key turned with a rusty click, and the shackles fell to the ground with a dull clang. The man rubbed at his raw skin, flesh marked by long weeks of chains. Clara's heart clenched at the sight. We'll tend to those when we reach my ranch. It's about an hour's ride. Can you manage? He nodded once. Good, she said, straightening her shoulders. The livery is this way. As they walked, whispers trailed after them like dust. But Clara didn't look back. She felt something stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Maybe she couldn't save her husband. Maybe she couldn't save her failing ranch. But this man, this human being everyone else called savage, maybe him she could save. And maybe, just maybe, he might save her too. The journey from town was quiet. Only the creak of saddle leather and the steady clop of hooves broke the silence. Clara stole small glances at the man riding beside her, trying to read his expression. Samuel Tallbear, as the sheriff had written on the bill of sale, rode like someone born to it, his back straight, his gaze fixed on the distant line of hills. Every movement carried grace, though she noticed the slight stiffness in his left side, a sign of pain he tried hard to hide. They rode until they reached a narrow valley where the creek ran clear between cottonwoods. Clara pulled her horse to a stop. We'll rest here. Let the horses drink. He nodded, then slid from the saddle carefully, his feet landing light on the earth. Clara watched him kneel by the water's edge and scoop a handful of the cold stream into his palms. He drank slowly, reverently, as though greeting something sacred. The simple act moved her more than she expected. The water's good here, she said quietly, fed by the mountain snow. He lifted his head, meeting her gaze for a moment before speaking. His voice was rough, the words careful. Water knows clean heart, clean water. It startled her to hear him speak more than 2 words. You talk like a man who's known both, she said softly. He looked away, eyes on the flowing creek. Once, she wanted to ask more, but sensed the pain behind that single word. Instead, she changed the subject. You speak English well. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Mission school. They teach us cut hair. Beat us if we forget their words. Clara's heart tightened. I'm sorry. No one deserves that. He looked at her again, searching her face. You are not afraid. Should I be? She asked, raising her chin. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. No, she smiled faintly. Then I'm not. They rode on, the silence between them less heavy than before. When the path rose over a ridge, the land opened into a wide stretch of grass and sagebrush. Clara pointed ahead. That's my place. Even from a distance, the ranch showed its struggles. The main house leaned a little to one side. Fence posts sagged. The barn roof was patched with mismatched shingles. Clara felt shame heat her cheeks. It wasn't always like this, she said, her voice low. We had 20 head of cattle once. My husband Jacob was a good man. He had big plans. Then he got sick. 3 days and he was gone. Samuel's eyes swept over the property, not with judgment, but quiet understanding. Good bones, he said finally. Land wants to live. She turned to him, surprised. You think so? He nodded. Land waits for hands that care. They reached the yard as the sun dipped low. Clara dismounted and led her horse to the barn. To her surprise, Samuel followed without being asked, removing the saddle with calm, practiced movements. Inside the house, Clara lit the lamp and motioned him toward the door. You can sleep in the barn. There's fresh hay and some blankets. I'll bring you supper when it's ready. He didn't argue, just nodded once, eyes flicking to the photograph on the mantel. Jacob's face frozen forever in the prime of life. My husband, Clara said quietly. He's been gone 3 years. Samuel's expression softened. He gave a small nod, then stepped outside. Just before the door closed, he turned back and said in that low, gravel-edged voice, Thank you. It was only 2 words, but they filled the small kitchen like music. That night, Clara carried a tray of beans, cornbread, and a few slices of preserved peaches to the barn. Samuel sat on a hay bale, mending a torn strap of harness. His hands were steady and skilled. You don't have to do that, she said. He looked up, eyes glinting in the lamplight. Broken things need fixing. She smiled, setting the tray beside him. Then you'll fit right in here. They ate quietly, the barn cats creeping closer to investigate. One bold tabby rubbed against Samuel's leg, and he reached down to stroke it, his big hand moving with surprising gentleness. Clara noticed and felt something stir deep inside her, a spark of trust, of warmth she hadn't felt in years. Later in bed, she listened to the familiar creaks of the old house, but beneath them was a new sound. The faint rhythm of another human moving about, the sense of another presence under her roof. It should have frightened her, she thought, yet she felt strangely at peace. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the worn floorboards. Clara stood at the kitchen table making a list of things that needed fixing. The list grew fast: roof leaks, fence gaps, the well pump that barely worked. She sighed, knowing she couldn't afford half of it. A knock sounded at the door. Samuel stood there, hair tied back, his face calm but watchful. He gestured toward the barn, then mimed swinging a hammer. "You want to work?" she asked. He nodded once. "I can't pay you," she admitted, embarrassed. "Spent everything I had just to—" She stopped herself. "You understand, don't you? Only food and shelter. That's all I can offer." He lifted his scarred hands, then pointed to the house and nodded again. The meaning was clear. "You freed me." "That's enough." Clara blinked back tears. "Well then," she said softly, "we'd better get started." She led him to the tool shed where Jacob's old tools still hung, coated in dust and rust. Samuel examined each one carefully, checking the handles, testing the edges. When he found the whetstone, he looked at her with a question in his eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "Use whatever you need." By midday, the steady rhythm of hammer on wood filled the air. Clara worked in the garden, but her gaze kept drifting to where Samuel rebuilt the fence. His movements were strong, sure, patient. When she brought him water, he paused long enough to drink, then said, "Good tools." "Your man knew iron." "He did," Clara said softly. "He used to say a man's only as good as his tools." Samuel smiled faintly. Wise man. That evening they ate together at the kitchen table. Clara found herself talking about Jacob, about her family back east, who'd told her to sell and return home, about how she couldn't give up what they'd started. Samuel listened quietly, his dark eyes thoughtful. When she finished, he spoke. "Land remembers. Bad times, good times. But land waits for hearts that stay." The words touched something deep in her. For the first time since Jacob's death, she felt she wasn't carrying her burdens alone. Days turned into weeks. They worked side by side, dawn to dusk. The ranch began to change. Fences stood straight. The barn no longer leaned. The garden greened again under their care. Each evening they shared quiet meals, and though few words passed between them, understanding grew like roots beneath dry soil. One morning, as clear water finally flowed again from the fixed well, Samuel smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He touched his chest and said, "Samuel." "My name," Clara repeated softly. "Samuel." He nodded, and she saw something ease in him, as if saying his own name had given back a piece of his soul. From that moment on, she called him by it, and every time she did, it sounded a little more like hope. The sound of approaching horses woke Clara before dawn. Through her window she saw the faint flicker of torches in the dark. Her stomach twisted. The warning Tom Bradley had given her days ago had come true. She rose, slipped on her boots, and reached for Jacob's shotgun that stood by the door. Samuel was already awake. He stepped from the small room off the kitchen, calm but alert, his eyes sharp in the dim light. "Stay inside," Clara whispered. "This is my fight." He shook his head. "No, we stand together." Before she could argue, the riders were in her yard. 6 men, the Harmon brothers, big and mean. Ray Hutchkins, Dale Morrison's foreman. 2 ranch hands from town, and at their head, the one man who carried more self-righteousness than courage, Reverend Blackwood. "Mrs. Whitford," the Reverend called, his voice booming like a sermon. "We've come to talk sense into you." Clara stepped onto the porch, the shotgun visible in her hands but lowered. Samuel stood just behind her, silent as a shadow. "Strange hour for a social visit," Clara said coldly. "Desperate times call for desperate measures," Blackwood replied. "You're living in sin with a heathen and bringing shame to this town. We can't let that continue." "I'm doing nothing wrong," Clara said, voice steady. "Mr. Tallbear works for me. He sleeps in the barn. We've broken no laws." Jim Harmon spat a dark stream of tobacco near her steps. "Don't matter where he sleeps. Ain't natural." A white woman keeping a savage man. "Watch your mouth," Clara warned. Or what? Pete Harmon sneered. You'll have your pet Indian scalp us? Samuel stepped forward then. He didn't speak. Didn't reach for the gun at his belt. He just looked at them, calm, unmoving, solid as stone. The men's laughter faltered. You see? Blackwood cried, pointing dramatically. He threatens good Christian men. This is what comes of letting sin take root. The only threat here, Clara said sharply, is from men who ride to a woman's home in the dark, carrying torches like cowards. Hutchkins scowled. We're here to protect you, ma'am. Protect me from what? A man who works harder than any of you? A man who's done nothing but help me? She took a step forward, her voice ringing clear. You talk about shame. Shame is watching a man chained and sold like an animal and doing nothing. The men shifted uneasily. Blackwood's face turned red with anger. You've lost your way, Mrs. Whitford, but it's not too late. Send this savage away and repent. Return to town where the good women of the church can guide you back to righteousness. Clara gave a bitter laugh. Guide me? The same women who cross the street to avoid me, who whisper behind their hands when I buy flour. She raised the shotgun higher. No, Reverend. I'll take my chances with the company I keep. Enough of this, Hutchkins growled, his hand resting on his pistol. You'll regret? The barrel of Clara's shotgun swung up, steady and sure. You take one more step toward this porch, Mr. Hutchkins, and you'll regret it first. The men hesitated. The only sound was the horse's nervous snorting and the soft crackle of a torch. This isn't over, Jim Harmon spat. Morrison's got plans for this place. He won't let some Indian lover stand in his way. Morrison can go to hell, Clara said evenly, and so can the rest of you if you can't see a man's worth beyond the color of his skin. Blackwood climbed back on his horse, his dignity tattered. I'll pray for your soul, Mrs. Whitford. Save your prayers for someone who wants them. They rode off, but not before Pete Harmon threw his torch toward the barn. Samuel moved fast, stamping it out before the dry wood could catch. When the last hoofbeat faded, Clara's hands began to shake. The shotgun slipped from her grip, and Samuel caught it before it hit the porch. You spoke brave, he said softly. True words. Clara sank onto the porch step, her breath shaky. It won't stop them. They'll be back. Yes, Samuel said quietly, but not tonight. The first light of morning broke over the hills, painting the sky pink and gold. Clara turned to him. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to face their hate because of me. He shook his head. No, sorry. You see man when others see savage. That is gift. I choose to stay. Not for shelter, for you. Her throat tightened. She had no words for what stirred in her chest. Fear, gratitude, and something warmer, deeper. That day they worked side by side in silence, both watchful. When evening came, Clara brought out an oilcloth bundle. She unwrapped it carefully. A Colt revolver, clean and oiled. This was Jacob's, she said. I want you to have it. Samuel hesitated. You trust me with this? I trust you with my life, she said simply. You've already earned that. He took the gun reverently. I will not dishonor this. Just then the sound of wagon wheels broke the quiet. Clara stiffened, but Samuel's eyes softened. One wagon, two people, not trouble. It was Lars and Ingrid Olsen, the elderly couple from the next valley. Ingrid climbed down briskly, her apron full of small bundles. We heard what happened this morning, she said. That Blackwood should be ashamed. God does not need men with fire to do his work. Lars held up a sack. We bring food, flour, salt, some pork, and rifle. Extra we have, Clara blinked, overcome. I can't pay you. Not for paying, Ingrid said firmly. For standing up when others hide. She turned to Samuel. You help her. She needs it. That's good. My Lars tried to do too much alone once. Nearly killed himself. Samuel nodded. You are kind people, Ingrid smiled. We remember what it is to be called names, to be hated for being different. You both have friends here. Remember that. When the Olsens left, Clara stood on the porch, watching their wagon disappear down the road. Beside her, Samuel's presence was steady, reassuring. They're good people, she said softly. Yes, Samuel agreed. Kind hearts still live in this land. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She looked out the window toward the barn where Samuel's lantern still burned. They had crossed a line, she realized. No longer strangers, no longer rescuer and rescued. Something deeper had taken root. Trust, shared purpose, maybe even love. She thought of Morrison's threats, of Blackwood's hateful words, of how quickly fear could turn to violence. But then she thought of the Olsons' kindness, of Samuel's calm strength, of his quiet promise. We stand together. For the first time in years, Clara felt safe, not because she was alone behind locked doors, but because she wasn't alone at all. She touched the arrowhead he had given her that evening, a smooth white stone tied with leather, carved by his mother long ago. He said it meant protection,